Are approved. The next order of business, we are welcoming our approved speakers, Associate Deans, Lou and Roberts from the graduate school. They are here to answer questions from you all. We'll run this sort of the same way that we've run previous approved speakers, where I'll call on folks to ask their questions. But first, I'll let the deans introduce themselves and give us anything that you think we should know going into the new semester before we get started with our questions.
Great, thank you. Brooke, would you like to start or would you like me to go?
Why don't you go ahead, Scott, and then I'll go after you.
Sure. All right. Well, hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. For those that I haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Scott Roberts. I am a former grad terp myself. I earned my PhD in social psychology here back in 2008, and was thrilled to have an opportunity to come back to campus in a few different roles in the Department of Psychology, in the campus's Teaching and Learning Transformation Center, and now as an assistant dean in the grad school. I started just under a year ago, a couple weeks before the onset of the pandemic. So this has been a very interesting first year in this role. But yeah, you know, what I wanted to just very quickly highlight is a few of the big things that I think we've been doing partly in response to the pandemic, and some things that we have coming to look forward to this semester. So for anyone who is new, you know that we shifted to an online asynchronous orientation, which was actually a really big success. We were able to engage far more students that way than we were ever able to with the live, big, overwhelming in-person event. And if you're interested in learning more about that, we have a summary report of the student engagement and the feedback, and we're really hoping to see that continue to grow. We expect to do it in that format at least this coming summer, and then we'll reevaluate. We also just wrapped up our January's Invest in Your Success Symposium, which was a collection of workshops and events for grad students. So I hope that all of you were able to attend at least one, but we do that again in the summer, and we have we'll be announcing the schedule of workshops and events for the semester in the coming days through our website and through the newsletter. I think the newsletter was another big thing that we implemented. You know, one of my goals coming in was to really improve the ways in which we can communicate directly to students. Historically, a lot of what was happening was we were sending information to programs and asking them to forward it, and that wasn't always happening consistently. And so now we have 3 newsletters, a doctoral edition, a master's, and an online master's that go directly to students. And so we've seen really good response rates with that. In terms of student support, we were thrilled to play a role in helping to distribute the CARES Relief Act money to grad students. We ended up giving just shy of $2 million to direct money to graduate students in support of the crisis. And we don't know exactly how the next relief bill is going to play out. That's still being reviewed and discussed, but you know, whatever we can do to make sure we are consistently advocating for as much as we can of that broader pot to go directly to graduate students and support their success. And we're also finding new ways to partner with university relations to seek more funding for fellowships and other awards. We've done a lot of internal things to address how do we help students get through when we're not in person. We updated the process for getting a committee nominated and for getting everyone to sign off on things digitally. Those are things that have been done on paper since we literally walked around in robes every day. So that was a big lift to move us into a digital workflow, but we've done a lot internally to adapt there. We're looking for more opportunities to host alumni. In a lot of our workshops and events, we do have alumni panels, and we're implementing some new resources to help you connect with alumni, to network, to schedule informational interviews, to see jobs that are posted by them. So I think there's a lot of exciting things coming from there. And then the last thing I really want to highlight is the Grad Ceru survey. So this is a survey done by universities all over, and there's specifically a survey for graduate students. We did this 2 years ago, but to be perfectly blunt, the response rate was really, really low. And the truth is that this is a huge effort to not just get input directly from grad students, but to also help us benchmark that against other universities. so that we can then use that information to bring it to programs and say, look, these are the issues that we're identifying within this program. And we can bring it to the president and the provost, say, these are the issues that we're identifying campus-wide. But I can't stress enough, it doesn't work unless we have engagement. And I know, I get it. I get a lot of survey requests. 30 to 45 minutes is not an insignificant chunk of time, and that's what we estimate, but it's a cohesive survey. And this is a great opportunity to really get a partnership going between the grad school and GSG and advocating for getting students to use their voice in this survey so that we can achieve a response rate that makes it representative of the student population, and use that as a tool for the next 2 years to advocate for resources and even policies. So so you'll hear more about that, but that's kind of what some of the highlights that were on my mind, and I'll turn it over to Dean Liu.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Liu, and I'm the Associate Dean of Academic Standards and Policies, which means I get to do a lot of work on refining policies, creating new policies, figuring out where policies are failing and what else we can do besides create new policies to fill those gaps. I've been a faculty member in the Department of Communication here for 12 years, but like Scott, I joined the grad school last January, and my area of research actually is crisis communication. So it has been a very interesting time to put what I research into practice, and I have a lot more empathy now for the people that I study. So just let me give you a brief overview so we have plenty of time for questions. The big push I've made is involving faculty, staff, and students in the policy process. So historically, we'd bring a policy to the graduate council, and those that felt comfortable voicing their opinion would, and we'd vote. And what many of the policies I've worked on in the past year, we've worked with a smaller group of folks, always having graduate students. They're members of the graduate council, but we have a group of maybe 5 with 2 of our grad student members and 3 faculty members, for example. And we've worked on developing policy together. And I think that's made it a lot more effective for the policies actually meet people's needs. And so we did that, for example, on guidance for involving graduate students in recruitment and admissions efforts, health and safety guidance for graduate assistants, and how to support graduate assistants through the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that's a process I'm hoping to continue moving forward. And with that, we were given about 10 minutes, so we hit that almost exactly on the mark, and we'll open it up for questions now.
All right, excellent. Thank you both so much. As they said, any questions that you all have for the deans, now's the time. So if you'll just raise your hand in the chat, then I'll be able to call on you.
Yes. Trying to raise my hand.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy Vera, Comparative Literature Program Representative, and I have a question for Scott. Do you know where and how we can access the research that you guys did about asynchronous online teaching? I think I would be really, I think my English department and Comparative Literature Program would be really interested in that.
Are you referring to the orientation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Is there
sure.
like a because you said that you guys found that it was more beneficial for students to have an asynchronous experience than synchronous experience?
Well, let me, sure. So first, let me say that, the evaluation we did really was just looking at the number of people engaged and the feedback that we got. I can't quite say that it's better pedagogically, but I think there are a lot of huge advantages in this particular context anyway. So I don't know that it applies to teaching at large, though I'm perfectly happy to, that was my former role. I can talk about that too, but really I think the main issue, the 2 main issues that I think we resolved, independent of the fact that the pandemic made it, impossible to meet in person, was one, anytime you hold an event in a physical location at a specific time, it inherently excludes some people who just can't make it. And so by providing it online, we made it accessible even before people arrive to campus, which is another advantage. And they can do it at their own pace and their own time. The other piece is that I mean, if you remember your orientation, I'll tell you, I remember one thing. I remember sitting in the ballroom and it was completely overwhelming. And I think the only thing I think I specifically remember, because I was shocked that they had to say it, was don't get into relationships with your undergraduate students. But everything else was just, it was trying to, drink from a fire hose. And so by providing it in an asynchronous online format, we also give students the chance to actually digest it and come back. And a lot of people said they would. So what I can share with you, and I'm gonna, I believe this link will work if it's set up correctly, and I think it is. I'll post in the chat. This is just a summary report that we put together on the engagement and feedback. So it just explains a little bit about the organization of the orientation, the different elements to it, the number of students that participated and completed it, and some of the feedback that we got, both in terms of the quantitative survey questions and a summary, a qualitative analysis of open-ended comments. So we're hoping to continue to work with programs to identify ways that they can integrate into ours, and whether they strongly recommend it or require it of their students is their purview. But we're not sure exactly what the long-term future holds, but we were very pleased with how this came together, given the difficulty of the circumstance and the time that we had to execute.
Thanks.
Excellent. Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Allard, Psychology. So I had two questions, but I think you just answered one of them. I was wondering what the response rate was for the graduate school survey, but it sounds like that's in that document.
Separate thing. This was orientation. The grad through survey, I don't recall off the top of my head what the last administration's response rate was, but I want to say it was in the teens. Brooke, do you happen to know?
I think it was something below 15%, so
Yeah,
not reliable.
I see Jennifer said 13. Yeah, that sounds about right. So low that it's hard to do anything with that.
Okay, so I guess a follow-up question, like was it pretty spread out among departments, or was it like pretty concentrated to maybe more like social sciences? Is there, I guess, like moving forward, is there a kind of a plan for maybe getting a better response rate in the future on something like that? That's
a good question. I need to go back and see, because it predates me, and so I'm not sure if but with a response rate that low, it's hard to imagine it was highly clustered in any one group. But I think that regardless, we have to make sure that the participation is representative, that it doesn't just end up being students in a particular set of fields that then have disproportionate voice. We want everyone to do it.
Great. So then my second question is for Brooke. So I serve on the Academic Affairs Committee. I'm the chair. And so I'm really interested to hear what kind of academic policies that you are hearing about that students are having the most trouble with during COVID-19.
Oh, that's a hard question. It's very driven individually. Of course, we've heard concerns about lots of leaves of absences, but that's a policy that we recently updated. So we feel like that process actually is going well on our end. We have heard some concerns about faculty not adequately supporting the request for the leaves. And so that is something that our OMSPUDS officer can work with students, and so can I confidentially. So that's been a concern. Delayed graduation, delayed dissertations, delayed thesis, delayed everything is certainly a concern. And that's something that Dean Fetter has advocated very strongly for, to get more funds. It's a partnership between the graduate school and the individual programs in terms of whether additional funding can be provided. And so it has to be a match, just because that makes the dollars go further, the idea from the grad school. So those are probably the two most, but then every day is a new adventure in policy. And there's so many policies. If you guys have looked at our website, it's overwhelming. So one of the things we're doing is doing an entire revamp of our website to make it more user-friendly, and that should hopefully launch next fall. And it will include some focus groups with you all and others on campus to make it a lot more easy to manage. I probably get dozens of emails every single day asking about, what does this policy mean and how does it relate to me?
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, Valerie.
Good afternoon. I wanted to share with you some trying to lower my hand and I raised it again. Some concerns that I'm hearing repeatedly from my constituents in my department, which have to do with the general policy or procedures for completing research in a time of global pandemic. The feedback that I'm hearing is that the last time they've seen updates about how to proceed with field work and face-to-face research and data collection hasn't been updated since the summertime. And you know, whatever the background to that particular aspect of the whole pandemic response is, there's a perception on the students' part that the university is just kind of ignoring this situation in the hopes that nothing bad happens. But then if it happens, they don't have to claim responsibility and can say, well, this wasn't what we expected you to do. So even just some communication along the lines of like, we're working to update this, but the situation is changing so frequently that, you know, we're trying to stay ahead of it, would be really helpful. But the overall consensus is just like, we're doing the best we can, but we're being asked by our collaborators what the policies are, and we don't know to be able to share that with them.
Can you, I appreciate you bringing that up. Can you maybe just say just a little bit more about, like, give me an example of a question or an issue that a student is facing, just so I understand kind of what you mentioned field work. So are we talking about restrictions on travel? Like, what are the pieces that are attached to that have been problematic?
For myself, you know, I've not been able to go in and work with existing collections. I'm an archaeologist, and so just being able to be on site has been problematic. There are some travel aspects to that as well. For my colleagues, I think it has more to do with policies around doing field work, because several of them are in, you know, varying stages of master's projects and dissertations, and just don't really have the guidelines to work with when they're being asked by various collaborating organizations or funding organizations what the institution's guidelines are.
Sure. So, you know, I think, and Brooke, please jump in. I'll just say, I know firsthand that in the conversations we've had related to these kinds of things, unfortunately, I think often we don't really impose our own restrictions. We try to follow the guidance provided by the CDC and by other overarching, right, superseding organizations, while at the same time advocating for students who rely on those institutions or the ability to travel to get that work done. I think a good recent example is as the university started to update its travel guidance and to give academic units the discretion to decide what is essential travel and what is not. I know that the dean was very strongly advocating that if a student needs to travel somewhere to stay on track with their work, and they're able to do so safely within the guidelines provided by, you know, the federal government, then that should be considered essential travel. But it's, every case is unique. Every building, every institution, every location, right, especially international travel, is particularly complex. And so it's, I think, very difficult to provide more specific guidance at the university level. But I know that has been a top priority for providing graduate students with time extensions. And we're seeking every source we can for funding to help support students who are inevitably delayed by the inability to do some of that work.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. So the restrictions on travel and research are set by the Vice President of Research. But I can certainly share with her some of these concerns. So if you all could collect them, I can package it in a nice way, just literally list them. I would be more than happy to share them. The way the process is currently working is exceptions are made at the dean level, not the dean of the graduate school, but the dean of your individual unit. So I'm an RHU, it would be Dean Dill who would make an exception for one of my PhD students. And so another concern there is there equity potentially? So you all could show us potentially, if you want to pursue this, how are these decisions being made differently? And if they're different across different colleges and schools, that would be really important for the DPR's office to understand. So we can definitely advocate on your behalf, but we have to stay in our lane in terms of policies that we're able to change. But I work very closely with the VPR and several of my research projects, and I'm on several university committees with her. So I'd be happy to have a conversation with her if there are problems that we can help resolve here.
Would you be willing to provide an email address for us, maybe in the chat, so that we could send those concerns directly to you?
Yep, doing that right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, excellent. We have a little bit more time if there are other questions. Tamara.
So Valerie's question actually kind of brought forward a recent concern that was brought to me by a constituent. Essentially, it's come to my attention that some advisors, and I think this is pretty common, they prefer their students collect new data for dissertation. That's obviously not a very viable option for many students right now. And I'm wondering if there are any policies that I guess protect students against this kind of corner that they can kind of get backed into, you know, by their advisors, you know, pushing for new data, whereas, you know, they're saying this might set me back in my program for a while.
No policy, but there is guidance. So part of the guidance I'll put the link in the chat, that we developed on how to support graduate assistants during COVID-19 talked about imagining different paths for degree completion. And so, you know, we can't pass a policy that requires faculty to do their job differently, right? So the quality, the integrity of a dissertation is very field specific. And so we couldn't necessarily pass a policy on that, but we can certainly nudge faculty in the right direction. And we do occasionally intervene. So again, if you talk to the ombudsperson or myself or Scott, we have had meetings with individual faculty to let them know that what they're doing is not appropriate, and here's why. So we are here to always to advocate on your behalf whenever we can, but some policies just aren't able to be created given the faculty's job responsibility.
I posted in the chat the link to the article that went up on our page, but was also sent out directly to all program directors and coordinators that addressed a number of different domains of supporting graduate students, including flexibility for those with caregiving responsibilities, and you know, those who are managing all sorts of different challenges during all of this.
All right, if there are no further questions, I'll say slowly to allow more people to ask questions if they have them. Then thank you for coming and speaking to us. I think this was helpful. We learned some things about the graduate school, and you hopefully learned some things about us. So we'll just say thank you. We're going to move on to the rest of our meeting. You're welcome to stay and watch us do our various parliamentary procedures, but I'm sure you have very busy schedules. So thank you for coming.
Unfortunately, we do, but thank you for having us. And if there's ever anything that we can do, please know that we're here as partners. And as issues and questions come up, please reach out to us. I know we have regular meetings with the executive committee, with the dean, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but looks forward to those regular meetings. And so if there's something that I personally can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Excellent. All right, the next order of business on the agenda is to move on to new business, which is 3 pieces of legislation to consider. The first is GSG A40A08, which I think may be misnumbered. I'll make sure the numbers are correct before I make it official, but let me share this screen. So this piece of legislation was authored by myself. So I'll give a quick overview of it so that folks know what we're talking about. So basically, this piece of legislation makes a technical change to the bylaws. One thing that we have heard from the stamp. So basically, this fixes a problem where people like Dan, right? Dan is graduating at the end of this year. Our bylaws say that Dan, as when he is not a graduate student, would not be allowed to be president anymore, even though the presidential term ends in June. So this allows Dan to continue to be president until June, even though he has graduated. Part of the reason for this, the stamp let us know that it was going to cause problems with the stipends for members of the executive team, that they were supposed to be paid for this entire period of time, but our current bylaws meant that they weren't president anymore once they graduated, and those sorts of things. So all this does is say, if a member of the executive team graduates, then they continue in that office until the end of the semester, so that we can do some things with university policies. And I'm going to, sorry, I've got two screens here, but they're on two different levels. So let me make it bigger. So that's the introduction to that legislation. If anyone has comments, questions, or concerns, we'll open the floor for debate on GSG A40 A08. Laura McBride.
If no one has anything, then I motion to vote.
Is there any objection to moving to vote? Seeing none, or I guess I need a second.
Second.
Seconded. Now, is there any objection to moving to vote now that someone seconded it? No? Surprising. All right, in that case, Edie, if you would open the poll. We'll leave it open for 30 seconds as we usually do. All right. With the time to vote expiring, the yeas are 24, the nays are 0, and the abstentions are 2. The motion is agreed to. And so now we'll move on to GSG A40R06, a resolution calling for increased communication regarding supplementary funding for graduate students impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't believe the author is with us. I am correct about that. Let me share the correct screen. So I guess I, as one of the sponsors, will give a quick overview. So this legislation says that there have been some policies put into place regarding funding for graduate students who have been impacted by COVID-19, which we just sort of talked to the deans about. but that those policies have not been well communicated to graduate students. And so graduate students are basically unable to advocate for themselves to take advantage of those policies. And some graduate students are confused as to what exactly they are allowed to advocate for. And so what this does is asks that the graduate school, along with the various programs, issue some communication to graduate students to clarify what exactly their rights are in terms of advocating for themselves and this funding. So that's sort of an overview of it. I'll do my best to answer questions, but I'll admit that I'm not a total expert on it. If anyone has questions, comments, concerns, we'll open the floor for debate on GSG A40R06. No one has concerns about the graduate school telling graduate students more about things about money they can have? Interesting. Valerie.
I guess I have not so much a concern as a question to perhaps the whole of Assembly, because I know the second footnote quotes a statement that was distributed by the Department of Art, History, and Archaeology, and I know in BSOS we received a similar email. I'm wondering if this is the only communication that all departments across campus have received, or if anybody has received any more detailed information about funding at the graduate school level.
Laura.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I actually was made aware of this funding by Viana sending out the information about this resolution. So in answer to your question, Valerie, the chem department did not receive any info. So I think there's some departments out there that got some information and there's others that didn't get any. And that is a concern because then there's an equity issue. So I think this resolution is definitely needed so that the grad school can be aware that, you know, students aren't getting this information.
Alec, care to share some insight?
I'll chime in and say it's not just the chem department that didn't know about it. No one in the business school has heard anything about this. And so there's definitely, this is not exactly being publicized much, if at all, in many areas across campus.
Daniel.
Yeah, my question is about follow-up, assuming that this resolution passes. Are we sending this to like Dean Fetter? And then if so, does anybody have any idea like what the likelihood is that they'll listen to us?
So I'll let President Laffin answer.
Yeah, so the intentions at least would be to send this to Dean Fetter and the other deans that were here earlier. In addition to that, I was going to mention this later as well. As I think Assistant Dean Roberts mentioned, we have now regular meetings with the deans. Our next one is on the 11th of February. So this could be one of the topics that we discuss kind of face to face as well. I'm assuming this passes.
Yeah, I think this is exactly the sort of thing that Associate Dean Liu would be very interested in, knowing that it was not communicated sufficiently and trying to make sure it is communicated sufficiently. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. If no one has anything, I motion to vote.
Motion to vote. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Motion has been heard and seconded. Is there any objection to moving to vote on GSG A40R06? Hearing none, we will open the poll. And with the time to vote expiring, the yeses are 27, the noes are 0, and the abstentions are 1. The legislation is agreed to. Excellent. And we have one more piece of legislation. Oh, I appear to have missed some things in the chat. Okay, I see. This is GSG A40 R07, a resolution calling for a university initiative to address the lack of affordable childcare on campus. It has several authors. Would any of the authors care to provide an introduction to this piece of legislation?
I can, if no one else on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee wants to, I can speak up. So this was really a Misty Yang communication. This was very much a joint effort of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I think that the issue is the committee did a great job articulating kind of the nature of the problem and the scope of the problem. And we're asking that the Graduate School's Office of Diversity and Inclusion really takes seriously thinking about providing and prioritizing affordable childcare for graduate students. I mean, it's pretty, if anyone has questions, or if anyone else on the committee wants to speak up, feel free.
Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. One question, part of Rules Committee that we had when we looked at this legislation was if the Office of Graduate Diversity and Inclusion was the correct place to send the resolution, because I just wasn't sure who was in charge of the childcare on campus. And so if you could just, I guess, clarify if they are in charge or if this should also go to another office as well.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, or any of the authors who wrote this.
I don't know. I just, for me, because it is an issue of diversity and inclusion, it seems to me that the director of diversity and inclusion for the graduate school should, if they're not the right person, should be, I guess my thought was they should be able to put the effort toward bringing together and communicating with the right parties, much the way that Dean Liu was saying she could communicate with the right parties about research issues. But if there is someone who knows a better person to send it to, I'm not of course I'm not opposed to sending it to, I'm sure the committee's not either, sending it to additional people.
I wonder if we should also send it to the graduate school, because I was looking at the link that Scott or Dean Roberts had put, which had like the news release, and in it was talking about childcare responsibilities of graduate students and faculty should be more, lenient or whatever. And so maybe this should also be sent to them so they're kind of made aware that there is this like inequity for graduate students trying to get their student or their kids into the childcare at the university.
Yeah, like as a, I know when we originally wrote it, it was directly to the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion in the graduate school, and it was a little changed, I guess, when I went to Rules Committee. So I mean, I'm not even sure what like the distinctions are there. So again, I am totally neutral on like where it ends up, and I'm open to any and all suggestions.
Valerie.
Valerie Hall, Anthropology. First of all, I would suggest also sending it to the Vice President of Student Affairs office, because I recently spoke to one of her assistants and I know she directly works with student parents and students with families. So that would definitely be another person who is very much on the front lines in terms of working with these communities. Secondly, I wanted to just speak in support of the bill in general, because when my husband was an undergrad, he had returned to school. It was right after my eldest child was born. And without a subsidy that Penn State provided for their on-campus daycare, I don't know that I could have worked. I don't know that he could have afforded to be in school. I don't know that we could have survived. So not only is this incredibly important legislation for families who are trying to, be both parents and students at the same time, but also I would suggest that, certainly Penn State and probably other R1 universities are already doing this in a best practices model kind of way that our university could perhaps learn from. They had a sliding scale for family incomes, and if you were a student parent, you got first priority over faculty and staff, and it just made all the difference in the world to my family. So I'm very much in support of this bill.
Tamara.
Hi, Tamara Allard, Psychology. So I guess I just have a point of information. In the second whereas, it says on-campus options such as the CYC prioritize children of professors over children of graduate students. Does that mean that it is more difficult for a graduate student even to get their child into the CYC? Like they're prioritizing even allowing children of graduate students? I guess I just want clarity on what that exactly means. Or is it just the cost that's the problem?
Misty.
Autumn, feel free to speak up here as well, but from what I understand, it's both, because there's so much demand for that option that there becomes like a wait list, and in that situation, professors are prioritized over graduate students. And I might be, again, someone can speak up if I'm misrepresenting that, but that's what I understand. So, and then there's other option on campus, and that's like the super, so there's an option I think that's a bit more affordable and could be subsidized, but there's always wait list. And when there is a wait list, those priority is given to professors. And then there's another option on campus, which is more privately run, and it's just really, really expensive. And so there's kind of like no outlet for graduate students, or no support. I don't know if outlet's the right word, but that's my understanding of the situation.
Okay, I guess that having that clarity is really helpful, because this almost sounds like a discrimination issue then.
Okay, well, Blessing is saying that that's incorrect. So
okay.
Maybe other folks that maybe have children can speak directly to the experience they've had, because I'm speaking from a situation where I don't have children, so I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I know Autumn is currently multitask. She's also in class right now. So she probably won't be able to speak up exactly on the issue, but yeah.
Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I didn't update my Zoom yet, so I'll figure it out. I just wanted to follow up on what I said. I don't mean to be rude or anything, but my children went to the CYC, so I'm pretty familiar with their policies. They only prioritize those who are affiliated with the university, so that does include students, postdocs, faculty, and staff. Yes, and I had children in graduate school, so I love this. I understand.
So I guess my point in asking that question is this second whereas statement necessary, or is this going to kind of derail the conversation if it's not technically accurate that they're prioritizing professor students over graduate students' children? Sorry, yeah.
Simple question. Alexander.
Alexander Hoyle, computer science. Just noting that this bears on the unionization issue. The UC system, for example, as mentioned in the resolution, offers $3,300 per academic year, and more if during the if you have a summer appointment, and that's a direct result of their union contract, whereas Syracuse with no union, although it does have support, appears to give 1,000 total per year. So just to keep in mind when we're talking about unionization, this is the sort of thing we'll hopefully be able to ask for. And otherwise, yeah, I mean, sending resolutions is great. And if we had some leverage to back it up, it would be even better.
Excellent. Yehuda.
Motion to strike lines 12 and 13, the possibly incorrect whereas clause, just based on the text of the CYC website, which I posted a link to in the chat.
Seconded.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Would anyone like to speak in favor of or against the amendment? If not, are there any objections to striking lines 12 and 13, the second whereas clause, which I've used the fun Microsoft Word strike through function to highlight from the resolution? Hearing no objections, it's gone. Alexander.
Yeah, just on that note, this, in terms of just minor wordsmithing, I guess I don't follow the logic behind, or I mean, I'm not aware of the support for the statement that those 3 universities prioritize the children of students over those of professors. If that's the case, I mean, I'm more than willing to believe it. Sure. It just seems like you might just say they offer funding and support for graduate students in the form of stipends, which is true for Ohio State and Syracuse. For Syracuse and UC Berkeley. Ohio State, I was just Googling and I didn't see anything, but.
You could replace Ohio State with Penn State because I know it's true there. Valerie Hall Anthropology.
I would be in support of that.
Okay, in that case, we're looking to amend this. Autumn is in the chat. Says Syracuse does prioritize students over faculty. She went to the Ohio State University, so she would know that as well. Although I will note, Autumn, that the was not in the original resolution and Rules Committee had to add it to the university's name. So it seems like you're falling down on the job there of all Ohio State undergrads. Great. So looks like we're looking to potentially amend the new second whereas clause, but how exactly we want to amend it, I guess, is open to the assembly.
I mean, if people feel strongly about this phrasing, fine. This does not mean that much to me, but just saying these schools provide financial support for childcare is, I think, factual, and it's not wishy-washy. It's literally just like they give money to graduate students if they have kids. So.
Okay, let me.
Lest someone reading this resolution think, oh, does that just mean, I don't know, they send out nice emails once in a while. It's like, no, they're putting money behind that prioritization.
So we're looking at an amendment that looks something like that. Tamara.
I'm wondering with this wording, if it almost seems like it's enough to just like provide scholarships to graduate students or some type of fellowship that helps them to support, you know, instead of like actual supplemental money. So I'm wondering if it should say like provides affordable health or provides affordable childcare for graduate students.
Certainly potential, and I'll leave that open to the assembly. I will say that the actual ask of the resolution is to create a strategy. It doesn't identify what that strategy needs to be. It gives some suggestions, to be sure, but yeah. Laura.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I don't know if everyone saw what I put in the chat, but I was looking at the CYC website, and there's a link to, there already is a childcare scholarship program, but it's through the state, not the university, and students are eligible for it, and the CYC accepts it. So something, maybe not necessarily on this amendment of the resolution, but another one we could have, if the university is not going to set up money for graduate students, maybe they need to make graduate students aware of this state scholarship that they could qualify for to help support affordable childcare. Because I could see the university coming back at us and being like, well, the state already does this.
So according to line 21, it says that grad students are not eligible for the state subsidy. I don't know where that information is from. Like, we didn't in rules do any research on that.
I mean, maybe they saw more what I did. Looking at the website, it says students, and I don't see anything about grad students are not eligible, but maybe someone applied for this and found out they weren't eligible. You just have to provide proof you're in school or that you work and make less than a certain amount of money.
So I don't know if Autumn, sorry, I don't know if Autumn's, so because this is, I feel like a lot of this information is, okay, here we go. Autumn's firsthand experience, she's sharing. I feel like I'm at a loss here because a lot of this is based on Autumn's personal struggles, and I want to make sure she, so I don't want things to get written out of things that she's experienced. So she's sharing it. She received a letter about this, I think, where something about, I know she's shared something about the way in which our work is classified prevents us from qualifying for this program somehow. I think she's about to put the text of the letter in chat.
Yehuda.
Sorry, I just pointed out that it said the line 21 thing. That was all.
Okay. Anyone else? Are there any objections to the amendment that is currently on the screen?
Valerie Hall, anthropology. Should we change financial support to provide a subsidy? Is that what Ohio and Syracuse and Berkeley do? I mean, because that is how it's worded at Penn State, because it's federally and university funded, and provide financial support, as I think somebody else noted, might read as like, well, you get a fellowship when you're a graduate student and that's financial support. So should we be explicit in saying it's a child care subsidy, I guess is my question.
I'm open to thoughts. Yehuda?
Because the details of this resolution are so important, I'm motioning to send this back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to add sourcing to the various claims in the various whereas clauses.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Are there any objections to the motion?
Well, I mean, I just kind of think in this issue, it's like an issue of time. I mean, our semester's running out. We're not going to meet for another couple of weeks. We have a lot of agreement that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think I'm very open to making it so, to changing it so we can just kind of get it to the appropriate office. But I mean, I'm not going to, so that would be my kind of lightly worded objection, I suppose. I feel like the sentiment is here that like this is a good thing to do, and by the time we send it back and then vote on it again, I just don't want to lose that time in trying to make progress on this semester.
Tamara?
I kind of agree with Misty that this seems pressing, and I'm wondering to what extent, because this is supposed to be a conversation, right? Like it's a resolution, so it's calling for the executive committee to have a conversation with administration. And I don't understand like why we can't just provide the executive committee with sources. Like this website's pretty informative, and I can see why a student would qualify for this just by looking at it. So.
Aaron.
Aaron Roth, computer science. If the request for sources is for the purpose of our discussion here, then what I'm about to say won't apply. But if the request for adding sources is for the purpose of showing to the administration and everybody here trusts the sources are there, I don't know if this is possible, but is it possible to do like a conditional vote where we say it's approved pending that the diversity committee add sources by such and such a date, and that would potentially satisfy both desires?
I like then as business management, or another option we could just do is we pass this as is while simultaneous, because that sort of conditional language seems a little bit weird. The diversity and inclusion committee can just send all the sources, and then if the university has any pushback, it's like, well, here are all the sources to back up every, like basically a supplementary document to go along with it saying, yes, what we put included in the text here is valid. Here's proof. Because then I don't think the sourcing is important in the actual document itself. Like as long as we can provide it in fast.
I think that's a reasonable point. I will say I don't doubt the veracity of the claims in this resolution, but in general, it's not great for the executive committee to go forward with incorrect information and then the university thinks we don't know what we're doing. I believe that all of this is true, but generally we do want to avoid that. So that would be my only. Valerie.
Valerie Hall, anthropology. Having removed lines, I guess it was 12 and 13, the clause and the notes about prioritizing the children of students, there is a statement in the second therefore clause about giving graduate students priority over professors for on-campus childcare options. So do we want that to stand as a request, or do we want to remove that language given that it was removed above?
That's an excellent question. So right now we're on the motion to send back to committee. Then we've got to vote on the amendment that we've got on the page, and then we can go back to that.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Not a problem. That's why it's my job to do that stuff, not yours. Laura.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I agree with what Simon's point was, and Yehuda. We want to have the sources to back this up before we send it and make sure everything we say is correct. So where we say that universities such as the Ohio State, Syracuse, and Berkeley do this, do they have websites where it shows that they provide financial support? I think we need to put that as footnotes, like was in the other resolution. where it says graduate students don't meet the definition of employment. Is there information, or is there like a anecdote that we could put to provide? Because I have a feeling, like Simon said, we don't want to go with incorrect information, and we want to look like we can back ourselves up with this statement, because we are essentially asking for them to set aside money. And when it comes to money, you know, they're going to be a little not willing to do it. So we want to make sure we have kind of the information to back ourselves up. And so we could either go through and try to find all this info now, or we send it back to the committee. And I don't remember exactly when our next meeting is, but it is only a couple weeks, next month. So, and since I think Dan and Simon said they meet every month with the deans, is that correct? It's not like this would be next semester that this issue would come up. It would just be a few-week delay. And I think that could be worth it if we can back ourselves up, so we show that we really know what we're talking about with this.
President Laffin.
So similarly to Laura's thought process here, correct me if I'm wrong, our next assembly is the 12th, right, of February, I think 2 weeks from Friday.
I believe so.
And then, so as I mentioned earlier, our meeting with the deans is the 11th, which is a little unfortunate for timing. But by the 11th, I would hope that this piece is ready to go again with the sources. So I would be comfortable, maybe not the piece itself, but even just the sources and the momentum, discussing with the deans, hey, this is coming in the pipeline, and GSG will formally be moving forward with this, pending an approval vote, the next day. So that conversation wouldn't be delayed. We wouldn't lose that momentum. So the sooner we have the sources, the information, we can hit the deans in an email or whatever form of communication to prep that in-person, that Zoom discussion, and then follow up the next day with an assembly vote. Because I think that timing would work out that way either way. So now we could have a piece with the sources and the correct language next assembly, but still get the conversation and the topics discussed at our next meeting with the deans. And similarly, sorry, as the execs and as any member of GSG, you can reach out to members of the university administration and staff to promote these kinds of things. So we as the execs can still reach out to the Office of Graduate Diversity and Inclusion to discuss this issue, and then again, back it up with the language of the official GSG stance. So we could do that as well.
Any further comments on the motion to refer back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee this piece of legislation?
Motion to vote on this proposal to send back to committee.
Okay, we have the motion heard. So now we'll vote. Obviously, we don't have a poll set up for this one. So if you would use the yes and no function on the participants tab. Yes, if you believe it should be sent back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for further citing. No, if you think we should continue to debate it here right now. And coffee cup if you have no opinion and wish to abstain.
I think they've actually changed the reactions. There might not be a coffee cup for everyone's version now.
Oh, there's a coffee cup for me. Interesting. Okay,
For
anything,
point of information,
anything
I
but
guess
yes and no, I'll count as an abstention.
Yeah, for some people, it's going to be under your reactions if it's not in the participant tab.
Wow.
Simon, can you repeat that? Anything other than yes or no is an abstention? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to start the vote for 30 seconds.
It also looks like after a few seconds, they go away. Because my marker just went and I'm watching people's disappear. So we might not be able to vote this way.
That is not great.
The yes and no seem to be sticking around.
My yes disappeared twice.
Raising hands is the only thing that sticks around. So maybe we have to do some like raise hand, yay, now.
Okay, yeah, that's gonna be how we're gonna have to do it. So if you are in favor of sending it back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, please raise your hand. I'll just have to count with my fingers. Okay. If you are opposed to sending it back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, so if you are in favor, please lower your hand. So I'll wait till we're at 0. And now if you're opposed, raise your hand. Okay, now everybody lower your hands, and if you wish to abstain, raise your hand. Okay, if I can count, which I think I can, the yeas are 13, the nays are 5, and the abstentions are 3. So the motion is agreed to, and this will be brought back up first thing at our next assembly meeting. So with that, that is all of the new business that we had on the agenda. And so now we will move into Representatives Forum, where you get to raise issues that you believe exist anywhere in the university. Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I'm going back to the resolution. Did we pass the amendment, or because we sent it back to committee, it's now like we don't vote on the amendment?
It just goes back and they can change it however they want.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Misty.
Oh. Hi, sorry. I was putting a reminder to send out a when to meet for the D&I committee so we can work on that. Okay, so last semester, you might remember we passed a resolution asking the D&I committee to serve as an anti-racism resource for graduate students. And so to help us fulfill this goal, we have developed a questionnaire that we hope will help us to both consolidate resources, but also to understand challenges and shortcomings that different departments are facing. And so I wanted to give everyone a heads up that I will be sending out the questionnaire on behalf of the committee, I think later today. So keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. And I wanted to share a couple of important points. So first, we're asking that each representative work to ensure that we receive feedback from your department by the end of the day on February 12th. So if you can please mark that in your calendar, that would be great. And then another thing is that as a committee, we wanted to ensure that students can share their feedback anonymously if they want to. So feel free to share the link directly with your constituents. But at the same time, we also would like to have at least one kind of consolidated response from each department, if possible. So figure out how you might best submit a response kind of as a representative of your department as well. So you might fill out the answers during a meeting of graduate students, or circulate a Google Doc to gather answers and then submit it as one in the form. We're trying to make it both manageable, but also representative. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. But again, I hope to send that out later today. Thanks.
Excellent. Are there any questions for Misty about what Misty just said?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm actually wondering, because there is a specific resolution that we're working on in the Academic Affairs Committee that probably could use kind of some of the information that you would be collecting in this. will other representatives have access to some of the response and feedback that you're getting?
Sure, I don't see, we haven't really thought about that, but I don't see why not. Yeah, I think we could share it. It could be a resource because, I mean, our hope is to kind of consolidate and make it a public resource for graduate students broadly. So I would say definitely.
Great. Yeah. I'll just say like a little more about that. I know we had a conversation about bias training for graduate student applications, and we wanted to address that, but it's hard getting an understanding of who got bias training, if there is any bias training.
Yeah, so one of the questions is like, has your department had any training? And so, yeah, I can see how that would be directly applicable to that question.
Perfect, thanks.
I have a question for Missy. So can you clarify what you said? You want us to send the link so our constituents can fill it out individually, and then you also want us to have them tell us their experience so then we can send that to you?
Yeah, so, it was kind of this back and forth between like, our goal isn't, like Dean Roberts is like, well, we only got 13% response. And so there's nothing statistically significant. This isn't like a survey where we're trying to get like as many individual responses as possible. We just really want at least one statement from each department about like what's going on in their department. But at the same time, we recognize that there's some students that would like the opportunity to like fill it out anonymously because they might not feel comfortable kind of sharing broadly their concerns. So we're trying to make a space for both. So it's not like it's your responsibility to try to get 100% response rate from your department, but at the same time, we do want you to at least do your best to have like a response that seems to be your perspective on what's going on in your department. So we have that as the base minimum, but also there is an opportunity for students who would prefer to answer anonymously. So does that, I know it's kind of a both and, but I think it's kind of the best thing we came up with in terms of making sure we get responses from departments, but make space for folks to respond anonymously where they feel like that's how they want to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Mr. President.
I see that Christina and Yehuda have hands, so they can go before me. I'll go at the end.
Okay. I have Christina next.
Hi, thank you. Just similar to Misty, as you might recall, we've been working on getting a town hall for graduate international students, and that is happening. That will be happening in less than a month from now. So what we're working on right now as a committee is we want to gather as many concerns from international students as possible so we can prepare the questions that we would like to ask President Pines and all the other officials that will be joining us that day. And also, as you might recall from a couple sessions ago, we don't have a list of international students' emails. We will also like to include students that are not international students themselves, but that can have some insights on what is going on and what might be helpful for their fellow international students. So today or tomorrow, I will be sending a link to a survey that we want international students and other students to answer. And also we would like to ask you to send an email to your constituents so we make sure the survey it's reaching everyone. And also since now people are aware that this town hall is happening so soon. Yeah, that's everything I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just add real quick on to Christina's. There was quite a bit of negotiation about getting President Pines to actually participate. He was not initially excited about participating. The concession we had to give up in order to get President Pines to participate is that we have to give him all of the questions in advance. So that's why we're trying to gather as many questions and concerns as possible so that we can put them together, give them to Pines so that he can come back and have answers to them. So obviously not ideal for a town hall to be completely scripted, but the alternative was no Pines. And so Christina, Misty, and I got together and decided that was the best course of action going forward. So just so everybody is aware. Yehuda.
UW Computer Science. People have been reaching out to me as I requested a while ago about IT issues on campus. As you may have heard, the university is blocking people with older Mac computers and older versions of Windows from accessing campus services. This is unfortunately a necessary security change, but I would be interested to hear how many people are affected by this and whether people thought they received adequate notification. Also, just to give you some idea of the campus IT security environment, the university was just the subject of a very coordinated, targeted attack for the purpose of exfiltrating sensitive data and also putting ransomware on university computers, and that attack appears to have been stopped. So network security is really very important. I will potentially have more information after a meeting tomorrow, but I just wanted to ask for more feedback from people and also just let you know that really the campus is watching out for you and security is really important.
Great. Glad to hear that. Was it the Russians again?
I'll have more information tomorrow. So.
Excellent. Rob.
Hi, everyone. Rob Delco, Physics. My question, I guess it's a question and comment for the entire in the exec team. I think we talked a little bit about this at our legislative affairs committee meeting earlier this week. But about a week ago, my department chair had sent out a message to all people in the physics department, including graduate students, that PG County had moved higher ed into the 1B category of vaccine distribution, and that we should all pre-register at a link he provided. He also said this applies to faculty and staff, and I assume students as well. They'll just be looking for a university ID. And then I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, we received an email from the University of Maryland that stated the state's guide indicates only those in teaching in person or working on campus and in essential roles. But then they state that students live, they have something about students living on campus. They have something about UMD employees, but there's no like direct, this is what graduate students should do and expect about vaccine distribution. And so I was wondering if anyone had heard anything or if there's a way to ask for more clear guidance.
I could kind of provide a little more information to Rob's point. I received a follow-up email from the head of the chem department that said they didn't answer if graduate students qualified, but it was anyone who would be teaching in person or if they're over 65 qualified. So I think if you will be teaching in person this semester, you could make an argument that you qualify and then you could pre-register. As far as I know, my advisor was telling me he pre-registered and he was actually supposed to get his vaccine today. They did not ask anything about like his employment status or like verification of it. It was just like, who are you affiliated, your age, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know when you get there if they ask for more information.
Yeah, I guess the other thing too, though, is I guess anyone who's offered a vaccine should probably take a vaccine, but I don't want people, department chairs and others directing mass graduate students to like sign up for vaccines when there's other people that should be ahead of them. Mm-hmm. Because per my department chair's email, it was like anyone and everyone in the department should go and get a vaccine, but has not clarified further directly to the graduate students. And I know graduate students in my department read emails from the graduate chair more than the University of Maryland itself, especially when you look at the different sizes of the emails.
Yeah, from what I understand, that's not correct. I don't think it's anyone and everyone in higher ed, but I'm not 100% sure.
I just want to chime in here because this was actually a conversation in my lab meeting the other day because we're collecting data in person with human subjects. And I know that there are people who are working, in labs that are requiring them to come in because their studies would literally come to a crashing halt without in-person work. And so our question, and I think this is still a question that really hasn't been answered, is are in-person people who are coming in to lab to do research, are we considered essential? Because the wording essential, I don't know, like it does seem like it applies more to teachers, but at the same time, like you're still at risk if you're coming into a lab and you're working with humans, or you're working in a lab with other humans.
So I'll say, as someone who studies both federal-state relations and relations between state units of government, that not all of this is on the university for sure. The rollout of the vaccine has caused a lot of problems in U.S. federalism, and there's just I know for a fact we had a meeting with some faculty members at the University Health Center who had to fight to be included when healthcare workers were being included because they work at a university health center, which is different than a hospital or a doctor's office, and so it wasn't laid out. Certainly there needs to be some clarification. I'm not sure the university has the clarification. It's entirely possible that this is something that we need clarification from the governor's office rather than the university itself. But it's certainly something we can bring up.
Yeah, and Simon, I know that was like what we had talked about at the committee meeting, but that was prior to this like new email that we received 2 days ago from the university, which laid out a couple like clearly defined people who could and who did not qualify, but it never like it didn't have anything about graduate students, and so maybe graduate students is a specific tricky area for people to get clarification on, but it just seemed odd to me that that some people were given clarification and we were not.
Yeah, I think it's not that we're tricky, it's just that we're forgotten about. But yeah, I agree. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send an email to Andy Clark, who is the university system government relations rep, and his partner, Patrick Hogan, and see if we can't get some clarification from the governor's office about the status of graduate students who are teaching, graduate students who are not teaching, graduate students who are not graduate assistants at all. All those sorts of things are obviously gradations in all that sort of stuff.
Simon, can you also just make a point to ask, I know you kind of said like graduate students who aren't graduate assistants, but I think most of us, well, I don't know, most of us who are in like science fields work in a lab, right? And so while like I am on a teaching assistantship that doesn't require me to be in person, I am a part of the lab that does. So just make sure that that is included, because I think that's a fair number of graduate students.
I was told that if you received a letter from the beginning of the pandemic that you're allowed to be on campus because you're essential, then that still qualifies as essential, that they're not revisiting that also. So I don't know how many people, I fall into that because I do IT work, which means I do come in contact with people, but so I don't know like how they're defining that either. We were told, hey, just show them the letter.
Alec.
Sure. Just one quick question asking about a bit of old business. In our November assembly, I know we passed a bill authorizing the funding of a position to handle all the PR needs for for GSG. I was just wondering if we made any progress on hiring somebody and letting us know who we should contact if there's PR things that need to be done.
Mr. President.
Alec, that is a wonderful segue because that's one of the things I was going to bring up, but I wanted to go last and no one else is on the list. So we can start with that. So yes, the position is actually live as we speak on Stamp eJobs. There we go. I've had Jen Prime to post that link since the beginning of the assembly whenever it came up. Please share that. I will note the way Stamp eJobs works, it looks almost like it pays $700 per hour. clearly we don't have the budget for that, and that would be exceptional. I would switch jobs. That's $700 over the semester. It technically has to be paid hourly because of just how things are posted. That's live until Sunday. We'll hopefully have someone selected by the February 12th assembly, so you all can meet them, and then also they can get started on the February newsletter and the website, and all the things that we included in that resolution. Questions on that, Alec or anyone, before I go on to my master list here? And if you have suggestions, refer them to the list, or to the link, but also let us know, because we always love referrals.
I have a quick question. It might derail us, so don't answer it if it is. Is the reason that some of the legislation hasn't been updated on the website because we're waiting for a PR person who would be in charge of some of the website, or is there other issues with that?
Not really. It'd be nice if I could blame it on them. That's mostly just the execs. Admittedly, I have been slow. I have no printers in my life. So anytime something new, I like to hand sign them so it's official, and then I have to find some way to scan it. But yes, once we have a PR person, that'll be easier. But yeah, we will certainly get that. If there's one that you're particularly interested in that you wanted to share with someone, like I can get that to you directly. But as far as getting it posted to the website, that will be coming. I apologize that it hasn't happened yet. That one, I'll take the fall for that one. Okay, moving right along. Something kind of exciting. If Edie, if you're ready to share your screen, we have some fall semester wrap up outstanding committee member awards that if we were in a regular year, I would stand up and announce your name and hand you a certificate. And this year, I'm just going to read your name and then pause as we all silently clap. So we're just going to go top down. The committee chair selected these recipients. So thank your committee chair for selecting them, and also thank you for doing the hard work. And you'll see I have a very consistent signature. It's wonderful how consistent I am with this signature. For the Local and Civic Engagement Committee, thank you, Daniel Smolyak, outstanding rep for that committee. For Academic Affairs, shout out to Valerie Hall. International Student Affairs, Sophia Moret, thank you. Rules, Yehuda Katz, consistent there, thank you. Legislative Action, our only two-time recipient, Valerie Hall, back at it. Student Affairs, Nathaniel Furlick, thank you. Budget and Finance, Alec Dennis. Community Development, Stephen Thomas. Diversity and Inclusion, Kristen Reck, who isn't here today, but claps to Kristen. At least I don't think she's here. Governance, Rachel Lamb. Elections, Nestor Shavaria. And the grad committee, which we'll chat about later because that's coming up in April, Ahmad Prasanna. I think that's it if I remember the order correctly. Yes, it is. So again, were we allowed to be in person, I would be handing you that and put it on your fridge. But for now, I do have some other things to chat about with you all. Simon, correct me if this is now dated information, but I believe the USMSC is still looking for someone to join us to chat about collective bargaining. Are we past that at this point?
We are not past it. We thought we were past it. Let me give a real quick update. I sent you all an email yesterday asking you to distribute that that petition and ask for testimony, written testimony for the graduate student bargaining. I said that we may have a hearing as early as the first week of February. We now know that that is not true. The meeting will be February 18th, will be the hearing that we get in the Finance Committee, which is great because we get some extra time to up our numbers on the petition. But yes, Dan, I think that does mean that we have time for, at the next USMSC meeting, some folks to come and convince our fellow graduate students at other institutions that this is something that they should be supporting. We've made all of the regular arguments that we make, so we're looking for some folks with a story to tell that really illustrates the reason why collective bargaining is important. We are also looking for folks like that to testify not in person, but live at the actual assembly, at the actual committee meeting. We get to have 4 people. I am in charge, sort of picking who those 4 people are. So if you either know someone who has a really good story about how collective bargaining could help them, or you are that person, please reach out to us. We have a couple of places where we really need people with those stories to really sell, to provide examples for what we mean when we talk about how collective bargaining is important. Because, you know, I can sit there and talk about statistics and numbers all we want, but everybody hates statistics and numbers, much to my chagrin. So we need stories, and I don't have a good one. So we need some help.
Simon, I like statistics and numbers, don't worry. So yes, so to emphasize that, USMSC, as I think most, if not all of you know, is the University System of Maryland Student Council. So all of the university systems president, Annie Rappaport, she big timed us and went 1 level up. I serve on that representing our GSG. Dan Alpert, the SGA president, serves on that representing the undergrads. But I don't have much of a story anyways. I certainly support the movement and do so at these meetings, but it's easier to rally that support if you or someone you know can vocalize personal testimony there. Questions, comments, initial ideas before I move on to my next thing?
I have a comment. So I think I kind of echo you. I would have echoed you a week ago when you say like, oh, I don't really have a story that I can tell. But I think that as I've kind of gotten more and more involved with this collective bargaining issue, you start to realize that everyone has a story. And I think one of the main problems that we have in getting graduate students to fill out this form, as I've said before, is that students don't understand what they don't have. That, you know, you kind of become complacent with the situation you're in. I think like a really good example that was offered up in the meeting is, oh, you know, like everyone should have a desk and a phone. And as outdated as that sounds, it's something that I know specifically in my department, students have had to fight for. We even had our teaching assistant, you know, offices taken away from us. And so I think that maybe, and I feel like the email that Simon sent out was pretty thorough, but maybe if, you know, we could get some more on that, or if I guess asking students to look into it a little more, because you might not even realize that you have something to say on this. Like I didn't realize that we don't get Social Security benefits, like we're not paying into Social Security, or we're not considered employees by the state, which is really problematic. So
we don't get Social Security?
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And I
So
was
on the plus side, we don't have to pay the taxes on that.
So
but
you do get it for summertime work, but not for semester work.
So peanuts.
Yeah, that's certainly something, Tamara, that I at least will be having a conversation with the new PR person about telling the stories of what it means to have collective bargaining rights versus not have collective bargaining rights at very basic levels. So yes.
Well, tying it all together. Other thoughts on collective bargaining?
A thought I had is maybe in the emails you sent out, I know Simon, you just sent one, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, is maybe having an anecdote like that. Like if you're unsure how collective bargaining could affect you, here are some very like, I don't know if basic, but like everyday occurrences, because I didn't even think of that. I mean, I have, since I do computer work and I have an office and I have a desk, I don't have a phone, but I share my office with 4 people, but I don't have a lab. So it's kind of like, if I didn't have a desk, then like, you know, but if you work in a lab, I guess maybe you don't have a desk or you share it with people. Or there's no designated time that you get off. So maybe there should be agreed upon 2 weeks. You know, it's like, oh, my advisor gives me 2 weeks, but other people are like, well, we only get a week. You know, so maybe just some of those little anecdotes, like if you're unsure of what could be, you know, affected by collective bargaining, here are things, because I was kind of in the same situation. I was sort of sitting here like, yeah, I agree with it, but I couldn't think in my mind of a story that I would have, but now you just said that I can think now. So I feel like that would be good to include on the emails as we're trying to get people to fill out the forms and stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy to do that. We had talked about it in the LAC committee, and the reason it didn't end up on the email is because I had to scramble to get the email out in time. And I'd already sent you all so many emails because the email bounced back and then I couldn't send the documents and it was weird. But yeah, now that we have more time, we're gonna have another round of sending it out to you. And so I will be sure to include some of those very basic employment things that collective bargaining rights can get us, even if we don't create it.
I also want to just add 2 other things. One, you should ask yourself, do you have access to your like staff supply closet? Like, can you get a stapler? Because I can't unless my lab has it for me. I wanted a like a pencil sharpener because we didn't have one, and they said, well, you know, your advisor can get one. So things like that. The other thing is, I think we talked about one that was really salient today, which is that actually in the first line of the requirements for the scholarship we were talking about, it does say you have to be employed, and you're not employed if you're a graduate assistant. So.
All helpful. And as Simon mentioned, I think that's a great idea, Laura. I think that's easy enough to pursue it that way. In addition to, as opposed to, whatever phrase I'm forgetting, to testimony on the 7th. That would still be very helpful if people are willing to come and speak on behalf of UMD graduate students. Or at the very least, supply me with some information that I can share secondhand, but that's not as effective as some firsthand testimony. Okay, a couple of housekeeping.
Can I say something on that?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
So, but also be careful about not hanging too much on any specific point. Because so, for example, people mentioned the phones, and I can tell you that at the end of this fiscal year, the way that the university charges for phones is going to change, and your department is going to be paying for a phone for you, whether you have one or not. So they might just get you a phone because they're already paying for it, just as an example. So if you say, hey, we want a union so that we can have phones on our desks, and then at the end of this fiscal year, everyone gets a phone on their desk anyway, then you've lost an argument. So you have to just, you know, not focus on things like that too much.
And as a perfect example of that, the reason I believe that that is all changing is because last year at the hearing that we had, the chair of the committee said, I want to see some progress before next year. Everybody should get a desk and a phone. So the university decided that is exactly the amount of progress.
That's not the only reason, or even the main reason I think that it's changing.
Okay, fair enough. But that is what happened at the hearing last year. So
I will say though, on that point, I can promise you that I'm pretty sure not every student in my department has a desk. Which I think is more important than a phone.
President Laff.
Yes. Other comments, questions. I don't want to move on preemptively, even though I just almost did. Okay. As is new policy and practice, I will share my intentions with those 2 resolutions. I intend to sign them as they're written. I also will verbally support the 3rd one that got sent back. As I mentioned, we'll go to the deans with the content of that before we have the actual piece of it itself. Thank you on that. And the last thing, very exciting, We are beginning to move into next year's election cycle. So if I know it's so for starters, if you're planning on returning, please do. We love returners. We also love new folks, but for momentum and keeping issues on subject, it's great to have people come back. Moreover, it's great to have people come back and serve on the executive committee. So if you have any interest or any questions as to what we do and how we do it and the benefits of doing it, financial and otherwise, please let us know. We're happy to meet. You can meet with the whole committee. You can meet with one of us individually. I don't know at this point. So I'm graduating, as we just discussed at the beginning of this. Jen also put in the chat that she's happy to chat. She worked with last year's board as well. I think we'll have a fair amount of vacancies on the executive committee as far as people not returning to the board. So if you're interested and or you know people that would be good for the committee, please let us know so we can get that in motion.
I do have a question about elections. So I had a constituent, the chem department, reach out to me because I believe Kyle sent out an email a couple weeks ago to departments that were like underrepresented. So chemistry technically is 2 positions. And the student was interested in serving, but he said the application was closed. So I was not sure about the email that Kyle sent out. Was this for like midterm elections that the student could like be become a rep now, or was this interest for the elections that are held every April? Because I think the student's interested in like filling the position now, but I wasn't sure if we were doing any type of like midterm or special elections.
I don't see Kyle, but Kyle, please speak up if you are here and I just missed you. So as I think the only other member of the elections committee, so that email was almost certainly for the midterm elections. If so, the only drawback to holding just a ton of special elections, right? Like if someone doesn't sign up in time or whatever, is that we actually need to have Stamp put together the ballot because we can't check people based on their UID. But if you know folks who want to join GSG right now, who didn't get on this midterm ballot, which should be closing on Friday.
He told me it was already closed.
So yeah, the sign up to be on the ballot.
Oh, okay.
We're actually in the election right now.
Oh, okay.
It is actively happening. So some of your departments, there's an election happening, and encourage people to vote in it if you can. Yeah. So, but if you know people who want to join right now, first of all, they can, there's all sorts of ways that they can work with GSG without technically joining as a member, but also if they would really like to become a member, we can run as many midterm elections as we want. So just send them our way and we will, we can try to make that happen. So there have been some problems we had a couple of problems in this last round of folks who weren't registered, who weren't technically enrolled for the spring semester, who tried to run and then we had to say no, and that was all unfortunate, of course. Our rules, I think, just say you have to be an enrolled graduate student. I don't think you have to be full-time according to our bylaws. That doesn't mean, since we're the official shared governance body of the university, there are also university rules that govern some things about what we do. So I'm not 100% sure, but that is something that the next time the elections committee meets, which is just whenever I call Kyle, we can talk about that.
Thank you.
I'm guessing, Rob, your question is about this exact issue.
Yes. just kind of clarifying how numbers of representatives are counted, because I'm pretty sure the physics department has over 200 graduate students. And under my understanding, we should have 3 representatives, but we were not contacted for the midterms.
Yes. So the way that we prioritized reaching out in the midterms is the folks who were most underrepresented. So who were due the most new people and had the, you know, that sort of thing. So I don't think everybody got an email, because if we tried to send an email to the contact for every department, right, there are some departments that are literally one person. And so we prioritize based on those numbers. So I didn't do the prioritization this time around. That was Kyle. But that would be my guess as to why. Because if you have more than 200, you're right, you should get 3, and you have 2. So yeah. Misty.
I just had a quick question about committees that you were asking volunteers for in terms of next steps. If that's my question, are there next steps that folks that have volunteered for those committees should take, or what will be the next steps?
So the next steps are the thing I am doing somewhat actively now, which is determining whether or not all of these committees actually exist. Because I went through some of them and contacted the folks who my spreadsheet said to contact, and they were like, I've never heard of this committee. What are you talking about? It doesn't exist. So our spreadsheet is clearly somewhat flawed. And so I am trying to come up with the best way to identify all of the committees that we are due a seat on, because there's no like central database of that, right? It's just like each committee passes its own rules. It's like, we need a graduate student, and they don't, you know, if they don't actively contact us, they're not on our list. So I'm trying to figure out a way to figure out what committees we're actually due, so that maybe, you know, it may be that we just lose a year of committee membership on a lot of committees this year because we have to clean this up. But that way, at least next year, whoever is on the new executive committee has a full, complete list of where that happens.
Cool.
And we should insist that if the committees reach out to GSG for members, that they should seat the members that the GSG chooses.
And I just wanted to offer, if you need help, I know I told the people on my committee that volunteered for other committees that part of volunteering was like figuring out what the heck was going on. So if you need help, like tracking down people, and I mean, I can, you know, I've told people that that's part of being on the committee, is figuring out if it exists and if it's worth being on. So if that might help you more quickly gather what you need, just let me know.
Will do. Thank you.
Just two quick points of information. One, in our bylaws, we just say that they are enrolled at the University of Maryland in the semester, so we do not specify full-time or part-time.
Right.
Now, that could be something different on the university side, but at least in the bylaws, it says that's what it says. So just wanted to clarify that one point. The one other question I had is, what is the actual date of the election, of like the nominations for full-time elections for like basically the coming year of the assembly?
The regular elections, we haven't set it yet.
I mean, are we talking late March, early April? Is that kind of what we're thinking? Because I know I just want to be aware of that because of the constitution change, how the reps vote on the incoming legislative, like the incoming executives of the VPs. We need to make sure that we have that early enough that we don't have a, issue with that.
That is my thought, late March, early April. But the committee hasn't actually set a time yet.
Okay.
Dan Laffin.
I wanted to just circle back, speaking of committees you can volunteer for. I mentioned during that award ceremony that I would circle back to grad. So Graduate Research Appreciation Day is set for April. I want to say, Edie, correct me if I'm wrong, I've asked you like 4 times already. It's April 6th to the 8th.
Yes.
In the mornings, yes. If you want to join that committee and help that happen, it's happening virtually. That would be wonderful. That is a committee that typically has larger attendance. If you want to volunteer to kind of monitor the day of things, also please reach out to me or Edie so we can coordinate that. Not to put you on the spot, but if there's other things you want to share, Edie.
Yes. The next thing I want to share is about judges. So it's kind of like a little bit kind of hard for us to get judges from years past. We had like similar problems. So please, if you can talk to any of your coordinators, faculty members, if they want to be part of judging grad, please, we will appreciate that. And if you need more information about that, please email me and we will talk about that.
Tamara.
Hi. So I think the biggest thing is I've noticed there's this kind of conversation ongoing in the chat about employment and overload employment. And I think it needs to be addressed in the bigger group because I think there's some clarifications that need to be made here.
Okay, what I haven't been following the chat. What exactly is the question?
So someone brought up that in some departments, graduate students are not allowed to have a second position or job at the university, and he says specifically later that he's not talking just about GSG, he's talking about other issues, but this seems to be department specific. And so I think we just need some clarity on this. Or Darcy, if you wanted to speak up, I guess, and clarify your question a little.
Okay. It was not a question, I guess it was a comment. So my name is Darcy from the Tamale department, and I started looking for a job out of school. And while I was in that process, I was told that if I get a second job, like a second position, let's say administrative position or any other, like a technician in another lab, no as an assistantship, I will have to make sure that I don't exceed X amount of hours, and also that I will have to request permission to a department. And now I just started a second job for the state, which is not related to the school. But when I was doing this process, I have meetings with graduate director from my department because of this situation. So it was not a question, it was a comment that some departments tell students that you only can work for the school 20 hours as an assistantship, and they want you to focus just on your research. But of course, for some student like me, I'm a single mom, I have a daughter. For me, that doesn't work. So, I take the risk of taking a job out of school, a professional job out of school, and I keep going with my PhD. But something needs to be clarified at the graduate school level, because my advisor is still telling me that I need to ask for permission to get a job out of school or even inside the school. And I think that this is not the first time where someone had told me that in my department, but this is also in other departments. It needs to be clarified. Graduate school cannot block the ability of any student to get a job out of school while we're doing 5-6 years of school. Because another benefit of working out of school while you're doing your PhD is that you get experience that you're not getting from the school. We don't get all the experience in the world. We living in this little bubble that we're getting everything with a PhD, but no, it's not like that. When we finish PhD, we realize that we don't have so many skills that we're supposed to get through PhD. So I knew that because before my master, I worked for state and federal, but now during my PhD, I just made the decision, I start working. But I think I'm not concerned about me, but I'm concerned about all the students that are coming behind me and they're not able to get a second job. And another thing about why I need a second job. As many of you guys probably know, when you request an apartment, when you're trying to get an apartment, they look at your income. And then when you provide your pay stub, the pay stub say you're making how much? 467 biweekly, which is 900 monthly, which means that you don't make 1.5 or 2 times the rent, which means that you don't get approved to move to the apartment. And so many students end up getting student loans like me so we can get approved for an apartment. And that's a mistake that I made for 2 years, just getting student loans so I can afford to get approved for an apartment. I could pay the apartment, but when they look at the pay stub, our income is so low that we can get approved for an apartment. So, it's just something to think about. I know this have been recording, so I hope nobody in my department see this recording.
Yeah, certainly something we can bring up with our meeting with the graduate school, because I don't know the laws and the rules and all. I'm not aware of it. I know that I've gotten jobs outside of the university while teaching at the university. Sometimes I didn't tell my department about them, but that's fine. But yeah, we will ask the grad school about that. And if the policy isn't clear, that's exactly the sort of thing that Dean Liu has been trying to clarify for departments, is what those sorts of rules are. So that's now on the agenda for our meeting with them.
Can I also just add that from my experience, because I've specifically looked into this policy in my department, it's different. Like they said that they can't ban you, and they've actually asked me to take on overload TA's shifts. And I just want to hammer home that this might be a really good thing to include in a testimony about collective bargaining. Anyway.
Yeah, and I can also just add that I think for the chem department, they say you're only supposed to do 20 hours a week, but then you can have like an extra 10. But I got an exemption so that I could be an adjunct instructor. So I think there are ways around it, but it might be department specific. But then I think for international students, there's visa rules that no matter what the university says, you can't work around.
Yeah,
so
certainly for international students, there's problems.
Yeah, but you said she mentioned that she got it because she got an exemption. That shouldn't be an exemption. It should be, we don't need an exemption to be able to have a second job in a school. And I'm not an international student.
Yeah,
so
I
they
think
did
Darcy,
that to me, and I'm American, was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So it's just the fact that, and then you got an exemption. We don't need to have an exemption. That is so wrong. It's wrong.
right, and I think that's a great point for collective bargaining. But I kind of remember when I like agreed to come to the chem department that I said like I agreed to like the 20-hour thing. I don't know if it's at university level or not though, but I've heard other departments have that.
I also know that I remember looking at other, like offer letters, and they actually had a requirement saying that you weren't allowed to work outside of the university.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's very variable based on what school you're in, the department you're in, etc.
Yeah, but I think asking the deans for clarification is a good idea.
Yeah, we'll talk to them about it for sure. So we've got about a minute left, unless we want to extend our time. One thing that I wanted to say real quick, was contacted by a Diamondback reporter, not our fearless Diamondback reporter who's with us right now, but a different Diamondback reporter wanted graduate student comment on the new pass-fail policy, because it doesn't apply to graduate students, it only applies to undergrads. I said I didn't have any particularly interesting thoughts on that, but that I would ask at the assembly, that if there's anyone who would like to opine in the Diamondback about the impact of that on graduate students, please let me know, and please let me know soon, because she wants to file the article on Friday. So you got to set that up pretty quick. If no one else wants to talk about it, I'm going to do the interview and I will just say the boring things that I have to say. But yeah. I figured I would throw it out to anyone who had more interesting things to say than me. Great. President Laffin, you want to close us out?
I had nothing else. I don't know if my hand was still up. I mean, thank you all for hearing what I had to share and providing your feedback. In the immediate future, we'll follow up on these employment restrictions to my department, and then we'll get the ball rolling on the child care issue as well, because I know those were lingering discussions. Thank you.
All right. Then I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All right, and hearing no objection, we will adjourn until February the 12th. Thank you all for coming and for working hard.
Thanks, Simon.